In 2006, Pokémon celebrated its 10th anniversary and entered its 4th generation of games. While many could see that the franchise's popularity had peaked right before the turn of the millennium, it could still be considered as going strong, still being popular with new generations of kids. And now, it was the Zoomers' turn. Pokémon Diamond and Pearl was another fresh start for the anime, but not as different from before as you'd think. It follows the same structure as the advanced generation, and brings back some of the more serious tone of the original series, making for an interesting combination of elements. And here's where you're going to see me review its first two dub seasons, Diamond and Pearl and Battle Dimension. If you want to know why I cover 2 seasons at a time, it's because I originally put a 100 episode limit on my review subjects, but that's gone out the window for quite some time. The point is, I'm sticking to my formula. It's how I've gotten used to watching the show annually, tedious as it may be, but I'm glad to say it felt far less tedious this time. So, going back to the start of Gen 4, how were the Pokémon games doing? As I went over last time, Pokémon was a very slow adapter to the Nintendo DS era, the biggest possible reason being that Nintendo weren't sure if it would succeed initially, and continued to support the less powerful Game Boy Advance for some time. But gradually across 2005 and 2006, the DS found a humongous audience in the casual market. Puzzle games and pet simulators were the talk of the town, so when Pokémon finally came to the system in September 2006, it was popular but no longer a system seller. In fact, this was the first generation of handhelds in which a set of Pokémon games wouldn't be the best sellers. Does that mean it was in danger? Of course not. Diamond and Pearl performed better than Ruby and Sapphire, but accounted for a smaller ratio of the console's sales. Combining these factors, it's fair to say the Gen 4 games were roughly as popular as Gen 3, give or take, and that went for the anime as well. Premiering on TV Tokyo on September 28, 2006, and Cartoon Network on April 20, 2007, the show stayed popular for being 9 years into its run, but the English dub was still going through some changes. The previous season Battle Frontier saw a shake-up in the voice cast that I went over last time, but the second season of the Diamond and Pearl dub saw further changes and distances from its past, being the first to be recorded at Duart rather than Taj Productions, and to lack any background music from 4Kids Entertainment, effectively burning the bridge to the original dub that many fans still hoped could be reinstated. It's sad, but it's the business. But I'll save any more dub talk for later. Time to see what these 104 or so episodes are made of.
Now do your best and take care of yourself, okay?
No need to worry, Mom.
Dawn, no!
See, I told ya. Bye.
Meet Dawn, another 10-year-old girl heading out to begin her Pokémon journey in the Sinnoh region. Her mother, Joanna, is a top coordinator, so she's hoping to follow in her footsteps with a new Piplup, but soon bumps into Ash, Pikachu and Brock, kicking off their new adventures. This is all starting to seem very familiar to Ash, meeting a new girl and Brock in a new region, starting his journey from scratch with only Pikachu and Apom, and being within earshot of a new wave of Pokemon gang activity. But as characters, our trio and their associates are pretty good this go around. Ash is a lot of things. He's continuing to build a stronger Pokemon team, taking the lessons he learnt in Hoenn to heart, but as you'll soon see why, he's also more hot-headed than he's been in a while. It definitely isn't because of Brock, who's made a remarkable bounce back. He didn't feel as vital to Hoenn as I would have liked, so it's great that they gave him more stories, made him smarter again, and even improved his act around potential partners. And Dawn made a very likeable first impression, and only got better from there. She runs the gamut of emotions, getting angry and sad as easily as she can get happy, making it feel like the narrative's throwing her around in the right ways. I knew what she was like way faster than May. Team Rocket continue to follow Ash around in hopes of stealing Pikachu, but after they fail for the 500th time in a row, it's less about wondering if they can succeed and more wanting them to be characters. And to be fair, James, Meowth, and even Jessie get some hearty spotlights with meaningful emotional beats. As for the professors, the new one from Sanjam Town is Professor Rowan, a stern but fair figure who hasn't gotten to the bottom of why all the professors in this world are named after trees. And Oak has been whittled down to the poetry guy, as Dawn puts it. It's not the end of the world, as Ash no longer seems dependent on him for information or support. Joanna, Dawn's mother, has filled in that role. not being much more interesting than Diane, except for the fact that she's a former coordinator. Other regulars include Cynthia, a member of the Elite Four who often appears to give the travelers support and good advice, Dawn's rival Zoe, a stylish and hardwired coordinator who's nonetheless very friendly towards Dawn, Kenny, Dawn's old friend from school who nicknames her Dee Dee for as of yet unknown reasons, Conway, a reference to that sniveling nerd in the Gen 1 games, Angie, a girl Ash is paired up with at a Pokemon training camp, and an easily agitated news reporter who always gets bonked on the head by the mic. All pretty fun characters except Conway, but if you want easily agitated, look at Ash's new rival Paul. He's been the first character in years to consistently tick off Ash for sucking all the fun out of Pokemon battles and treating his Pokemon way too harshly. Like, I'm surprised that they don't hold back how toxic he is. He's a completely different beast from Gary, who appears a few times this series as an old friend, which is nice to see. But if you want me to lighten the mood, in my first draft of this review, I kept misspelling Paul's name as Pale, so there you go. You are Pale. Deal with the consequences. There are more bad eggs in Sinnoh, however, including Pokemon hunters led by the mysterious Jay, who kidnap Pokemon to sell them. This isn't treated as misguided or redeemable, only something to be fought against. Fine by me. Season 11 also sees the start of Team Galactic's involvement in the narrative. I can only hope this leads to something big instead of being ignored like the Aqua and Magma feud from the last series. A new generation means new Pokemon, with Ash only retaining Pikachu and Aipom from Hoenn. Pikachu was given a little more focus in the battle department, which I was glad to see, making him seem as strong as he is marketably cute. By the midway point of the saga, he's also got a dependable Grotle, sensitive Chimchar, cocky Weasel, and emotional Gliscor among other Pokemon. Notice how I was able to describe every one of them by their personality first. Basic as they may be, I like how most of them are as easy to identify as characters as the humans this go around. Dawn's Pokemon I was a little more worried about at first. Piplup's voice is just as annoying to me as Scyther or Cyndaquil's, and it's pretty annoying whenever they choose to depict him as a bratty toddler. He's useful in battles, but hanging by a thread for me. But Dawn's later catches are memorable for the right reasons, such as her romantic Baneri and hyperactive Pachirisu. I'd have to say, Pachirisu is one of my new favorite Pokemon, just going off how it's depicted in the show. It's a cutie. Last of the new mons I wanted to bring up is Croagunk, Brock's new Heartbreaker, giving him a poison jab whenever he gets smitten with another Jenny or Joy. Misty was offended by the behavior, Max was annoyed by it, Croagunk just jabs his trainer for the funny. I can get behind that.
It's all about the challenges. It's a brand new game and a brand new world and a brand new rival and a brand new diamond and a brand new pearl and a brand new battle and a brand new chance to begin again. Then even a band.
Before I offer my thoughts on the stories in Season 10, I just wanted to get it out of the way, the theme song is terrible. It would be one thing if they went for a harder rock sound, unfinished as the instrumental may be, but you've got this very vague rap about this being a new region that sets up the wrong tone for it. Doesn't help that this season was very obsessed with employing cold opens that are basically previews for the episode. So you're thrown from a random collection of scenes that were better off in the ads to an unfitting theme. Perfect. The Season 11 theme, We Will Be Heroes, addressed most of these problems and made for one of the best themes yet, so I guess they figured out what they were dubbing eventually. For an anime that's just reached its second decade on the air, I was impressed by how good of a season this was. The Pokemon Company dub has taken some time to get used to, and I can't say it'll ever be as charming as the 4Kids days, but I think all the voice actors have seen a big improvement, with Bill Rogers' take on Brock now sounding much closer to Eric Stewart's. I'm glad they've gotten better at acting because there are more emotional and dramatic stories in this run that really needed to be taken seriously. When the hunters are introduced, nearly everything about the presentation treats them like a threat. When Cynthia teaches the kids about some Sinnoh lore, it's treated with an appropriate reverence. Even the less important stories, the filler episodes I could have easily skipped, have a bit more of a punch to them. Maybe the anime was always like this, and the localizers dumbed it down to varying extents, but whatever the case, Sinnoh feels like a fresh start tonally. One of the key themes of Diamond and Pearl is humane Pokemon ownership. They examine the relationship everyone from trainers to regular busybodies have with their Pokemon, often by showing us the bad side. Paul's heartless treatment of his Pokemon, Chimchar in particular, is the well they like to scoop from the most. I think it's good for a franchise with such a strange world to remind the viewers that there are limits to the surrealism. Plenty of people were and still are very put off by the whole premise of just taking wild creatures and making them fight, but it's been long since they made it clear that Pokémon are smarter than real-world animals, and most are okay with this dynamic. With that said, a line in the sand had to be drawn, demonstrating that there's such a thing as bad Pokémon care. It's a harsh but vital wake-up call to every fan. The tone may be more serious than in a while, possibly ever, but Diamond and Pearl isn't too different from the advanced generation in terms of structure. To make up for the length of the video game generations, they've repeated the formula of 2 to 3 badges a year for Ash, and about as many contests for his female traveling companion. Keeping things interesting on the contest side is that, while Jessie competed in them in Hoenn and Kanto all the time, her disguises we found out. Now everyone around her is legally blind, and she's getting away with LARPing as a legitimate co-ordinator called Jessalina. It was odd the first few times they didn't expose her, but now I'm kind of interested with where they can take this in future seasons. I gradually got more invested as the season wore on. Things were finally clicking for me in ways they hadn't since Master Quest. Not to discredit the things Advanced Generation did well, but the greater emphasis on themes, drama, and character was very welcome. And when I finished Season 10, I was pretty excited to check out how the story continued in 11.
We will be heroes. Battle Dimension Pokémon.
Battle Dimension is my favorite season. Just cutting to the chase, here are the new rankings for the dub seasons. 12 and 13 could be terrible, and I'd still have a massive appreciation for Season 11. It's the luck of the draw, I guess. The studios that make the anime in Japan don't have much consideration for how the episodes will be packaged overseas, but they saw most of this as the second year of the Diamond and Pearl saga. As such, it's no surprise that they spent it building upon the foundation of the first year. Ash's relationships with his Pokémon feel more personal, especially those with Paul's abandoned Chimchar, and the Gliscor who starts out afraid of everything. He's been through enough with Pikachu, time to prove that he can be just as personable with the others. Oddly enough, many of the most emotional stories this season come from Team Rocket. They seem to strike gold whenever they say goodbye to their Pokémon these days, but it hasn't gotten cheap from exposure. James trading as Cacnea is given a different reasoning, but is still for the Pokemon's own good, while Jessie giving up her Dustox may be a bye-bye Butterfree rerun, but it's a pretty great one. Then there's the episode where they let themselves go and have to work hard to regain their old mojo, reprising their original motto too. I never thought I'd be willing to hear it again, but here we are. In fact, you hear a lot of oldies return. The Pokémon Company no longer had access to the 4Kids background music, so you're going to start recognizing tracks you haven't heard regularly since the Orange Islands. Gotta say, I'm a little ticked at the awesome Johto and Hoenn tracks that have been hidden from me. As for mini arcs in Season 11, I'm pretty positive on most of them. Team Galactic was given an epic introduction, we got a similar Ranger 2-parter to the Battle Frontier, and it was a treat to see May return to compete at the Wallace Cup at Lake Valor. Bringing her back to pit her against Dawn is a double-edged sword because I'm sure they'd get some pushback from the character's fans no matter who won. But I'm just happy with how easily she felt like part of the main team again. The Pokemon camp seemed very much like some filler, so kids away for summer wouldn't miss anything important, but the later episodes are substantial enough for it to not feel like a waste of time. Now to talk about the animation, and I have to commend OLM for their consistency over the years. Year by year, I've seen subtle adjustments and improvements accumulated over a decade of content and millions of hours of experience. It all makes the presentation and battles that much more appealing. Like, it's neat to see they've got the resources to make weekly CGI with little hassle, and their ending painting specialist had to be given a raise because there's a lot more of those too. We're also starting to see our first steps in the evolution of the anime's design style. Sure, the animation went through some changes going from cells to digital and from Hoenn to the Battle Frontier, but we're starting to see more characters with sleeker, more detailed designs, with more shading and more realistic eyes. I hope putting May and Dawn side by side is a good indicator of where they're headed. So far, I don't think it's much better or worse, but I have gotten used to the style of the earlier generations. The Sinnoh Pokemon don't bother me either. I think they're just as creative as the ones from the first 3 gens. Some are less appealing than others, but that isn't my current point. The point is, Ash's clothes look a little better, but are on track to becoming more like a uniform than something he threw on, which I don't find as relatable. I kinda prefer his more recent outfits for harkening back to that more casual vibe of the original, but I don't know if I'll ever get to these. Now it's time to list my favorite episodes. This may not look like a lot given how positive I've been on these seasons, but I don't want this video to be too long. Losing its lustrous kicks off a big scheme from Team Galactic to steal a mysterious orb connected to the legendary Palkia. There's a lot of action, people involved, and an enemy hiding in plain sight. It's setting up something pretty interesting. Staging a hero's welcome sees the Wallace Cup begin, and it's probably going to remain the most exciting coordination event of this generation. I really don't know how they're going to top it. Journey to the Unknown is Ruins Exploration number 153, but they haven't bumped into the unknown very often, and they help out dramatically. I love how weird and otherworldly they make this place. Ill Will hunting was an odd combination, Gary and the Hunters, but it worked out in the end. Seeing Ash and Gary team up on rare occasions has been a treat for some time, and it was clever to put them against a big threat that's only getting bigger. Top-down training is our other orb episode, my new favorite genre, with Cynthia making a delicate but commanding first impression. I can see why she's become a fan favorite. Glory Blaze is where we get to see Chimchar's backstory and an explanation for why Paul pushes him so hard. An explanation that only makes you happier with the way the episode ends, with him ready to join Ash. An adorable ending to warm up the mood. Lost Leader Strategy is another rather emotional one where we learn about Paul's brother who isn't a bad guy at all, and the last gym leader Paul's battled whom he's broken the spirit of. At least she has a friendly chat with Dawn who gets her back on her feet. Gosh, every time Paul meets someone they need comforting. Strategy with a Smile is the culmination of the Wallace Cup arc. I take no shame in fighting these more exciting than Ash's gym battles at the moment, and while we're getting so recent that I don't want to spoil that many outcomes now, both May and Dawn turned in a passionate performance. Malice in Wonderland is another wonderfully weird episode, where the gangs get taken into a dream world run by a Miss Magius. This seems like the sort of thing they would have done years ago. Like, I thought this was just a reskin of another episode, but no, there's nothing else quite like it. Crossing Paths is the aforementioned Bye Bye Butterfree rerun with Jessie and Dustox, but for as great as that episode is, I'm glad this one found a way to be distinct. Focusing on a romance Jessie once had, a missed opportunity that she doesn't want her Dustox to emulate. It works very well. Tears for Fears is the most memorable and helpful installment of Chimchar's healing process, and the point by which he completely trusts that Ash will be a better trainer to him than Paul ever was. I guess Chimchar proved that there's still work to be done, but this was a worthy end of the beginning. My favorite Diamond and Pearl episode so far would be Pika and Goliath, where after losing to a Raichu with a delightfully annoying trainer,
I'm already down with a cool Pichu and Raichu, but I also want to be making friends with a cool Pikachu, dig? Let me break it down.
Pikachu, for the first time, contemplates evolving. It's easy to compare this to Electric Shock Showdown, it's the same setup and question, but here they give Pikachu that contemplation, that chance to get stronger. It's the sort of episode I've been wanting to see from him for a long time, and maybe a fair bit better than these 5. Camping It Up, for being the start of the Camp Saga, feels like the least essential in terms of intrigue and character growth. It set my expectations pretty low, but things thankfully improved quite a bit. The Champ Twins may not be as bad as the Bicker the Better, but it's a similarly forced conflict where Ash and Dawn only now find it hard to work together. It's kinda refreshing to see a title reference another cartoon, but why the Cramp Twins of all things? Gym Balaya is about Team Rocket running their own gym. It's rigged and boring and you're just waiting for the fight to make way for, well, the fight. Steamboat Willies is one of the biggest idiot plots of the generation so far, with Ash, Dawn, and Brock just leaving their Pokémon on a boat and not expecting anything to go wrong. Funnily enough, things go wrong, just because they had to think of a conflict in a new location. And last but not least, there's Drifloon on the Wind, an aimless filler episode where one Nurse Joy's daughter gets too eager to deliver some mail using the family Drifloon, which I haven't heard the best things about personally. And then they throw in a legendary Pokemon out of the blue, possibly to make the events feel more important, but their way of doing so felt pretty slapdash. With the exception of those and a couple other less memorable episodes, I felt like this first half of Diamond and Pearl was a great reinvigoration of the anime, adding back mystery and heart while delivering what audiences liked about the advanced generation. This may be one of the shorter Pokemon reviews on my channel, But despite my praises, I feel like I have less to add to my thoughts on the show so far into it. I've committed myself to the next 2 seasons, which you'll see me review next year, but after that, I'm gonna take a very long break from Pokémon. Meaning Black and White is now on the cards, but maybe not in this review format. I'll explain later. But for now, just know that I'm ready for my next battle.
Coming up on Cartoon Network. Next.
Check it out! This Whooper's got something stuck on its tail.